Hello, everyone. My name is Moshe Naveh from the SAP Community team. Welcome to today's SAP Community Call about consuming OData v4 services using SAP Cloud SDK for JavaScript. Today we have Marika and Jordan from the SAP Cloud SDK team. And Marika, please take it away.
Or actually, Jordan, take it away. You will start, right?
Thank you both. I'll take it away and then pass over to Marika. Hello from my side. This is Jordan, as Moshe announced, from the Cloud SDK team. And today we want to tell you a little bit about our latest development in the SDK for JavaScript. Before we start presenting the content, I want to make you acquainted with our forward-looking statement on the next slide. Please be aware that everything that we show today is for your information. We do not do any official announcement, and please make your purchasing and investment decisions based on what's generally available and not on some forward-looking statements that we might show today. All right, thank you for that. If you go for the next slide. First of all, as usual, I want to give a brief introduction about the SAP Cloud SDK. If you're here for the first time in our call, here is a high-level overview, what the Cloud SDK offers, what kind of functionalities. First of all, the Cloud SDK offers some client libraries to connect to different SAP solutions like S/4HANA, C/4HANA, and some others that are displayed here. Secondly, the SAP Cloud SDK library supports connecting to different services that are provided over the SAP Cloud Platform, which might be either technical services like, for example, the connectivity package, destination service, and so on, but also business services like workflow or any other services that are being provided over the SAP Cloud Platform. And last but not least, if you have a look at the right, we also support you when you go towards DevOps, especially when we talk about continuous delivery. We also have a continuous delivery toolkit that helps you incorporate the best practices and leverage the cloud advantages at your best. Next one. Here is what happened recently since our last call. Starting with the Java library, here we have an updated version of the SAP Cloud Platform Workflow Service Client. As we presented a few calls back, we are able to actually ship also client libraries for different services. And in this case, this workflow service is supported out of the box with SAP Cloud SDK, so that actually, if you plan to use this service in your project, you can use it directly over the appropriate dependency for your Maven project. Secondly, of course, the team is working very hard on the functionality side, and like we see here, right now we are trying to introduce more convenient API for batch requests that is actually already available as beta in the Java library. On the JavaScript side, which is also today's topic, we have the experimental support for OData v4. The word experimental means that even the API is already there. You should, of course, keep in mind that some things might change or adjusted because, of course, we try to deliver the most convenient way for you to develop extensions and applications with our SDK. Next one. What will be shown today? In a few seconds, I'll hand over to Marika, and she will tell you a little bit more about the SDK for JavaScript. What does the library contain and what capabilities we have. Secondly, there will be a small introduction of OData v4, especially of the support for OData v4, of course, and a small demo. And last but not least, we'll have a look at the outlook and the next development steps. With that, now I think I can hand over to Marika.
Okay. Yeah, as Jordan said, I am part of the development team of the SAP Cloud SDK for JavaScript. And also, as Jordan already gave a very general overview of what the SAP Cloud SDK is, I want to also give you a short still overview look of the features that the SAP Cloud SDK brings with itself. Those are the main things that we support basically. So first of all, you can build and execute requests for OData services with a fluent API. Up to now, OData v2 was supported, but since very recently, we also support parts and experimentally, as mentioned before, for OData v4. In addition to that, we allow to generate, or we generate ourselves some libraries, some client libraries for SAP S4HANA OData services. So all the OData services of SAP S4HANA are available to you out of the box so that you can basically create your own requests based on that. We've talked about this in previous sessions multiple times. And if you need some other service or have your own services, you're also able to generate clients for those services that work the same way basically as the ones for SAP S4HANA. In addition to that, we have a CLI that helps you to create applications that use the SAP Cloud SDK out of the box again, and allow you to create basically applications that you can run on Cloud Foundry as we think might be best practices or how it fits together with the SAP Cloud SDK. But of course, you're free to use that everywhere because we're independent of any other technologies. We only need Cloud Foundry basically to run and S4HANA. Good. So I wanted to also give you a short recap of how to build and execute a request. So in general, there are 3 steps to that. The first step means that you need to initialize your request. So what we see here, again, as usual in most of our examples, we talk about the business partner, which is an entity of the business partner service of SAP S4HANA. And here we have the business partner where we invoke the request builder. And once we've invoked the request builder, you are able to initialize one of the requests that are available to the business partner. In this case, you can see, because this is written in TypeScript, you also get auto completion, which is quite helpful. And you can see that the available services here or requests would be create, get all requests. So getting all business partners, getting business partners or specific business partners by key, and updating business partners. Many services or many entities also allow to be deleted. The business partner is a case where you cannot delete, but this is just on the side. So for this example, to illustrate the steps, I chose the create. And once you have initialized the create request, you can configure the create request. Here on the top lines, you can see the basically how you would configure the create request. So this is mandatory configuration. You need to pass something you want to create. So in this case, here you initialize the create request, and then you send or you configure the create request to create a payload out of the business partner that you created here. So that's just one example. In addition to the mandatory configuration that is available here, or that I illustrated here, you also have, or you have the opportunity to configure multiple things in addition to that. So this is optional. You can, for example, set custom headers as I did it in this example. This is very helpful if you need to set a custom header, if you want to run examples against the sandbox of the API hub, which we will see later on, or also other examples. For example, custom query parameters, custom path parts, basically the service path can be replaced and stuff like that. So step 1, initialize, step 2, configure, and the last step is execute. And in the last step, then you say against which destination you want to execute your request. This example here shows the most simple destination, which would be just a URL. In previous sessions, we've also talked about different ways of talking to destinations. But for today, I want to just keep it simple. So that would be how you then execute. So that's the general view. And these steps are all valid for both OData v2 and v4. So, so in the future, even when we now continue with OData v4, or in addition to OData v2 support OData v4, the API in general remains the same, and these steps definitely also remain the same. So, and not to forget, there are some further capabilities that I just wanted to quickly mention and not really talk about this in depth. So Joran already mentioned batch requests. These are supported in v2. We did not implement support for this in v4 yet, but it's planned. Function imports are also available in addition to all the CRUD operations for OData v2. This is already implemented for OData v4. There are still some missing parts, as we will see later on as well. And of course, ETAG handling and CSRF token handling happens automatically under the hood. So there's nothing that you need to take care of, except if you need ETAGs, then you can basically leverage the functionality that is already there, also making it easier than the usual parsing, basically. This is both supported in v2 and v4. Okay, then let's take a look at what is actually new in OData v4. Let's start with not what is new, but what was changed. I tried to make it a little bit simple here, so there are no really huge new features here mentioned, but I wanted to kind of make clear that there is a lot of things happening under the hood that might not be visible to users of the SDK, although there is much happening in OData v4 itself. So two of the most interesting features, in my opinion, are the more powerful query options as opposed to before. So filter and expand existed before, but they now have extended capabilities, which I will also show in a demo right after this. So yeah, I will explain it more in detail there. In addition to that, there are new or different EDM data types. So some of them were deprecated. For example, EDM date time was now replaced with, or not replaced, it was just deprecated because EDM date time offset, which was already there before, is more helpful with the time offset. Without that, there were issues that therefore the maintainers of OData decided to remove that. And there is EDM date, which was added, and it does not contain any time information at all, which is basically the replacement for date time, but without time. And then in addition to that, EDM time was replaced with EDM duration and EDM time of day. All of those things are also implemented in the SAP Cloud SDK with JavaScript now. Then there are also additional filter functions. So many of the filter functions from OData v2 remained or are the same as v4, but there are some additional ones, like for example, matches pattern and some date functions that also are something that is similar to what was there, but changed under the hood or allows more capability for the same things. Then there's a deep update. You could also say that this is a completely new feature, but there was a deep create in OData v2 already, meaning that if you create an entity, you can also create child or linked entities, basically, so navigation properties, together with this entity that you want to create. And deep update has a similar notion, although deep update is much more complex, because with deep update, this means you can update the linked entities or the navigation properties of an entity, which then in turn updating means you can update, create, or delete navigation properties, allowing you something very similar to a batch request in the end. Then also, as a side note, there were a lot of syntactic or structural changes in the requests, responses, and headers. So ETAGs are handled a little bit differently. The responses have a slightly different structure, things like that here and there, which from the outside, if you just look at the content itself, is not really relevant. Of course, there's much more. Probably also we are not aware of everything yet. We're still in the during the duration of doing that. So there are much more new features especially as well. But let's first maybe take a short look at a demo, because what I now would like to do is show you differences between OData v2 and v4, which might be quite interesting. So as usual, if you've seen demos from us, you probably know the business partner. That's the service that I will use for OData v2, where I want to show you some capabilities. So here in the API Hub, you can also find the resources. You can use the service itself directly from NPM, but you can also use the generator to generate stuff from here. The OData v4 service that I want to use is one of the reference services from the OData documentation. It's called the Trippin service. If you Google OData documentation or OData from the OData reference, you will find this service. This is the metadata that the service provides, and basically what I want to talk about today, or where we will go into detail, will probably be mostly the person entity and the person entity type and the people entity set, which we can find here. But you will see that in much more detail and more understandably in a second. So let me switch to the demo. So what I have here is a small project that does not really contain anything major. I have a package JSON where I downloaded the generator already. I will make these examples in TypeScript. So I use TypeScript and TS Node to run the examples. And then of course I use the SAP Cloud SDK core. And in combination with that, I will also use the V2 service, the business partner service that I talked about before. So to get back to a small example, or to understand how V2 worked for some of the features, let's talk about expansion in OData v2. So what I did here, and this will be the demo in a way in a second. So first of all, what we have here is the business partner, as I mentioned before. The business partner is imported from the VDM service, or from the pre-generated package that we created for SAP S/4HANA, right? So that's the service, and this is the entity that we're talking about. On the service, again, I create the request builder and use the get all requests. So this is the step one, initialize, as we've mentioned it before. And to make a request, I would now have to configure it, but theoretically for get all configuration is optional. So I could just execute this as a request. So I could call execute with some destination, and I prepared some fake destination here on the top. I could just execute that if I had a system behind it. I don't. So just to explain the structure of this demo in the end, what I will now do is I'll always go through these examples, and then I will just log the URL, the resulting URL of this example. So let's just try that to see how that works. So here I call expand demo. This function will be called, and then the URL of this request will be logged. So let's just try that. V2. And what we can see here, we now have the destination that was specified. Then this is the service path of which is part of the service that is generated here. This is still part of the service. And here we have the entity, and this is generated from the SDK. So this is a very simple URL. And now let's actually dive into the expand. So normally, if I want to select something on the business partner, or so if I want to make a request where I select properties of the business partner in this case, I would just say business partner, maybe first name, first name, and maybe also business partner last name. So let's quickly run that to have to compare that. So what was added here now? I have a select first name and last name. Now, if I want to also select a navigation property, so a property that is or a property that is connected to a different entity, I would usually in a request have to specify this in both the select and expand. So let's maybe see the behavior. So I want to have the business partner, let's say to address, to business partner address. And if I now do that, if I would just select it in the real world, basically, I would not really see anything, because in OData v2, I need to expand something to also see the data in the selection. Therefore, what the SDK does for you automatically, we do both. So the to business partner address is selected, and all of its entities, or all of its properties, sorry, are selected. And in addition to that, we expand to the business partner address. So this is done automatically. Maybe it might be also interesting here, as you've seen, we select the business partner address and then all of the properties of the business partner address. But in addition to that, we can also select specific properties of the business partner address. For this, I would have to use the business partner address, and let's say we want to have the city name here, and then you will see that this now also adds here the business partner address city name in addition to the expand. So we select our properties of the business partner, the linked business partner address property, and then the property city name of the business partner address that is linked here, or of the business partner addresses that are linked, because this is one-to-many relationship here. Doesn't really matter if it's one-to-many or one-to-one. So also for one-to-one properties, this behavior is the same here. That does not make a difference. Okay, over to v4. So as I said, I want to use the reference service from v4, and this is a service that is not part of the VDM that we package, right? So it's not part of this of the pre-generated services that we provide. So you have to create it on your own. I downloaded the EDMX file from this service, so the metadata that we saw before, and also adjusted this a little bit here in our service mapping so that the data produced there will be correct. And then I can generate the service. So for this, also as a recap, you can just generate, or this is more than a recap because the API still is the same. But the generator will now understand that this is an OData v4 service and generate slightly different VDMs there, or slightly different, not VDM, but a slightly different OData client for you, so that you can under the hood use the v4 stuff, let's say. So how would you do that? So the keyword here is generate OData client. This comes from the SAP Cloud SDK generator. So that's the command. You have to specify an input directory, which is input, and an output directory, which I call output. And this will then generate, this will then generate my service here. And this is based on the EDMX file as mentioned before. Okay, so now we're safe. We can start, and we can take a look at the expand in OData v4. So in OData v4, we're now looking at a different entity that is called people, but it has very similar properties as a business partner. So basically, it's also handling persons, similar to business partners. And here again, we have a request builder. We want to specify get all. As you know, this will create the same URL as you've seen before, except that maybe I actually still show that. TS node v4. So you can see that this now uses the destination that I specified here, the URL part that is part of the service, and so the service path, and then people is the name of the entity set that we want to talk about, and then again stuff that is generated from the SDK. So now if you want to expand something here, or let's again first select the name people, like this, people, not friends first name, and people last name, and you will see that this URL looks very familiar. It will look very similar to what we've seen in OData v2. So again, this just selects these properties. But now, in addition, if I would now continue the same way as I did in V2, in OData V2, people, and let's then select friends. Friends is a one-to-many relationship navigation property. You can see that this is not working, and this is not possible. This is not possible because here, that's the major difference in OData V2 and V4 for the Cloud SDK. It has a different semantic to select something here, and that therefore we decided to expand, because in OData V2, selection and expansion are closely coupled. In OData V4, this is not the case anymore, and expand is quite more sophisticated than in OData V2. Therefore, we decided to add an additional keyword, the expand here, where you then can expand friends. So now you would get the same result that we've seen in the V2 demo. Actually, it's not exactly the same. So the results would be the same, but the URL is not the same. So maybe if you remember, before we expanded to the navigation property here, friends in that case, but we also selected everything on that navigation property, which is not necessary in OData V4 anymore, because expansion automatically selects everything that is part of the expand. But that's not all. Of course, you can do still much more. You can continue. Let's maybe do it like this, and actually go ahead and say, I want to select something. So in the example before, we also, in addition to selecting everything, tried to select just specific properties. So because this is friends are also people, we use people here. So let's select username or something like that. Then in that case, you will see this will now generate a select within the expand. And this is a major difference to V2. So before, you could select everything in this one top level. There was one top level select, but here you also have selected nested selects within the expand. So that's the major difference here. And you can actually restrict your selection much further. So before, you were only able to restrict your selection by the selection, basically. But in addition to that, you can now also say you want to filter it. For example, you could say people first name equals Scott, and then this would then filter your expanded friends, and not the root property or the root entity, which in V2 was not possible in general. So maybe I'll just run that for you to see. Here, so there is a further filter statement. Of course, there is much more possible. So order by would be possible here, where you could then say, I want to order this ascending by the people's username or the person's username. Then you could say, I just want the first one, or actually I want only one, but I want the second one. That's why I skipped the first one. So this is all possible, and this would then be part of the resulting URL here. So it will be all appended to the subquery, basically. There's one more thing. You could theoretically also expand navigation properties of navigation properties. So this is currently not yet implemented, but very soon it will also be possible to expand on a second level, but this is currently not yet implemented. Okay, so that's for the expand. Now I would like to show you one other feature that I think is also a major change, in behavior. So something very new in OData V4, very new, maybe that's a lie because OData V4 has been there for a while, but as opposed to V2, that's quite new and also more powerful. So let's take a look at filtering in V2. By the way, if we talk about filtering, in V2, we always talk about filtering the entity that we created the request for. So in our old case here, the business partner. In OData V4, by the way, here you saw that we were already able to filter expanded properties, which is something that was just not possible before. So I'd like to stretch that or stress that, and this is now also possible. Okay, so let's take a look at filtering. I'll now do this one. So here we have a get all, and we want to filter something. First of all, the typical filter up to now was something where you would say you have the business partner, and you want the first name to equal maybe something like Peter. And this will then just generate a filter statement. So maybe I'll add a comment here, filter on properties. TS node v2. So as you can see, this just generated a new filter, first name equals Peter. Let's extend that example and add a business partner, and let's take a one-to-one navigation property. So there's one customer connected to one business partner, or you can navigate to one customer from one business partner. And here we also want to say that we want to filter this again. So we want to filter on navigation properties. And then we want to filter within this one. So we now go into the customer. So here the customer, let's say customer name should equal top bikes or something like that. That's the customer. So what you will see then, this filter that we saw before will be extended, and it's then connected with and, of course, and you have first name equals Peter, and the linked property customer name of customer is supposed to be top bikes. And this will then select all business partners who have a connection to one customer where the name of the customer is top bikes. Now, if you would like to filter by properties of a multilink, so of a link that has multiple, or that is a one-to-many relationship, this will be more difficult because this just won't work. So you can try this business partner to business partner address, but this does not have a filter. You can only do selections and so on. This will not work here. So there's no possibility for you to do this here. And this is also something that is just not possible in OData v2. So now let's take a look at v4. We will again do something very similar here, again with the people entity. So let's try that. First of all, if we run filter here, we have people, and then we can say filter first name equals Scott. So let's try that. And you will see it looks very similar to what we've seen in OData v2, so there is no difference there. Now I can also add the same thing for one-to-one property. So people and a person has a best friend, that's only one. And then we can again filter and say that the best friend's first name should equal Russell. If I run that, you will again see there is not much difference here either. So up to here, it basically is all the same. But now, which is what is new, you're now also able to filter the root entity. So in this case, the person that we were looking at the root, you can also filter that by one-to-many relationships. So let's try to do that. So let's look at all friends, not only one friend, and say filter. And you can see that here's the major difference. So we can see that friends is a one-to-many link, or we cannot see that here directly. You need to know the types, but this is a one-to-many link. And this knows the filter function, so it has a filter just because this the trip-in service here is a v4 service, and as opposed to that, the v2 service was not able to present me with that function basically. So this function doesn't exist there. So you can see that from the outside it looks very similar, but there are some details where there are differences. So now we have the filter, and now we want to say we want to find somebody who has at least one friend whose name is Russell. So we could say any people name, first name equals Russell. So what this will do, as I said, first of all, we look at somebody who has the name Scott, then who has the best friend whose name is Russell, but then also who has friends where at least one friend is Russell, basically. That would be what we're looking here for. So any of the friends should have the first name Russell. Let's try that. Yeah, there you can see it. So up to here it was the same, and then we concatenate that with a new query, which is then looking at the friends navigation property, which is a one-to-many relationship, and then we say any of the friends should have one property that is, or not one property, so one instance basically of friend, where the first name of that instance equals Russell. So it reads a little complicated, but hopefully with the SDK then it gets easier a little bit to generate that. Maybe also interesting, instead of any, there's also all. The difference here is, I mean, in the generation of the URL, you will see no difference, except that there is the keyword all instead of any. So similar to what you produce here. Semantically, the difference is that all friends of this person should have the first name Russell then. But that's probably not a good query in that case. Yeah. And although we're quite tight with the time now, I still think I want to show one example of something that is, it has been there before, but maybe it's not appreciated enough. Therefore, I think it might make sense to add this. So it was already there in V2, but we now also extended this a little bit more. So maybe then I'll just show it for V4, it doesn't matter. There's another option or another way to filter. You could also say you want to find somebody whose first name starts with S. And you would do that by just invoking the filter function. And you can do that using the keyword filter functions and importing that. So here we import filter functions, and we can see what filter functions are already implemented. So there are also filter functions that you can implement on your own. So there is a generic function that you can reuse for that. But we now also provide all of the existing ones, or most of the existing ones here. So let's maybe say starts with S. So that would be then maybe Scott or something like that. And this should equal true. There's of course something missing. Starts with, but who starts with? So people first name starts with S. Yeah. So those are the two parameters. Actually, you could have seen that here. The string and then the prefix. So this is just one example. There are multiple other ones. I'll also quickly run that. So you see what this produces. In the end, this produces again a string that has this function format, starts with first name, the parameter that you gave, and then it says equals true. Okay, then that's that for the demo. Let me switch back to PowerPoint. Okay, so what do we support in OData v4? It's quite difficult to really find everything and also make it presented in a way that it's interesting for you, because there are so many minor things that are below the hood, things that you don't see. But majorly what is now supported is create requests or creating requests and parsing the responses that those requests generate. So all the CRUD operations are supported, and also unbound functions. In OData v4, in addition to the unbound functions, there are bound functions and also unbound and bound actions. So in OData v2, this was all under functions, so actions and functions were functions. In OData v4, this is split. There we did not invest any time yet, so we basically only support the old stuff here. Then, of course, generating OData v4 clients, as you've seen before in my demo, I generated an OData v4 client. This is supported for all the features that we support in the core. Of course, when you gradually extend the features in the core, we will also gradually extend the generator for that. So at this stage, it supports everything that we've seen. Then refinement of expanded navigation properties. You've also seen that in the demo. But as I mentioned, the nested expand is not yet available. It's only the nested refinement, basically. We support collection types. That's also something new. Before, you always had EDM types. So the EDM types that are available, something like string, Boolean, int 32, int 16, and so on. These things now can also come as a collection. This is also available now. The lambda filter functions, any and all, that you also saw a second ago. Then the new EDM data types, except for types that are related to geography or geometry. This we did not implement yet, and we also don't plan for it in the near future, but we would be interested if anyone uses that or needs that. If that's the case, we'll probably put this on our roadmap soon. Then the additional filter functions that I talked about. And also under the hood, we updated e-tag handling from the outside, from the API. This doesn't change anything. And again, of course, the disclaimer, things might still not work 100% or features might still be missing, but we're very interested because this is experimental. But we're still very interested in your feedback. And if you find anything, then let us know, because this is very helpful to prioritize there. So the last point here, I want to give you a short outlook. So I've already touched on some of the points. So short term, we definitely want to implement the nested expand. We also want to finalize the OData v2 parity. So batch and deep create are something that that is not supported in v4 yet, although it's something that was already there in v2. Then there's the new concept of enum types, which I didn't talk about today, which is also not implemented. So that's something that for the next time, maybe. As I mentioned, bound, unbound functions and actions, that is still missing. Then the basic deep update. So we're planning on implementing the deep update, but only for replacing navigation properties. You will see in a second on the bottom, or I mentioned that before. Basically, a deep update can be like a batch request, so it can get quite complicated. And we decided to, first of all, not provide that feature unless we hear differently from you guys, probably. But the basic implementation of that is planned. And of course, we want to ensure GA quality. So we're currently working on having some possibility to end-to-end test everything. So of course, we ensure quality right away when we build stuff, but going into depth and really stress testing it, there is still some work to do for us. Yeah, and as I mentioned, there are some things that are not on our roadmap. I didn't really talk about the search feature. This is a new keyword that came in OData v4. It should be very simply implemented, and there are easy workarounds for users to add that. Or to use that with what we already have. Therefore, we decided that it's probably not worth extending our API for this. Again, unless we hear otherwise. I already talked about the extended deep update, which is similar to the batch, not exactly the same, but similar. Geotypes are currently not on our roadmap, and also derived types, which is something that allows you to specify additional types for entities. So we saw in the trip pin service there was the entity set and entity type people, people being a person, but the entity set people could also contain specific persons, something like a employee and a manager, for example. This is currently not on our roadmap either, but of course, if this is needed somewhere, we would be interested in use cases and understanding it a little bit better, and then continuing with that. Yeah, and that's that from my side, and I would again pass the word back to John.
Thanks, Marika. Yeah, everything that you saw today can actually be tried out by yourself. We used APIs that are already there, and as Marika pointed out, these are experimental UI APIs, so please keep that in mind. But we'll provide a GA version soon, hopefully, so that you will be able to use it also productively. Later you will get the slides, and of course you can simply click on the links here, so no need to take screenshots. Just joking, of course. But all these links here on the slide will be clickable for you. If you go to the next one, Marika. Before opening up for questions, our closing slide here. If you're interested to learn about SDK, if you want to get started, or if you are experienced and want to get some more deeper insights, here are some resources. For those of you who simply want to get started, probably Open SAP course is a good idea. That's linked here. And looking at the links below, we recently launched our new documentation portal, which is the first link here, where we try to provide the most interesting things in a manner that's easy to search and also to browse. And of course, for getting started, also the tutorial navigator is a very good starting point because it contains not only tutorials for beginners, but also for people that are experienced in programming, and also in the next step that are more experienced in building things on the SAP Cloud Platform. There are also some other resources in the SAP community area. We keep posting blog posts about interesting things that we do. And of course, moving to the right, you can reach out to us again using the SAP community Q&A space, or by contacting us on our email address like listed here. And if you are already using the Cloud SDK or have a very specific question, then opening a GitHub issue might be the most interesting for you, because then your issue will be immediately visible to the team. So this would be the fastest way to reach the team. And for more general things, of course, you can use any channels listed here. Having said that, we can open up for questions. I'm not sure if you can unmute yourself, but for sure you can use the Q&A feature of Zoom. So please go ahead. And one last time, next slide. Thanks. So right now we don't have any question in the chat. If you don't find the Q&A feature, of course, you can also use the chat. Before closing the call, we want to ask you for a small feedback that should have popped up now. Please check if you plan to use these features in your project, and we're very interested to know if you do so. Okay, if there are no questions so far, maybe I can hand back to Moshe for the closing.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for attending the call. The recording and the slides will be available, I guess, in a day or two in the SAP